people have heard of Jiu Jitsu. What's shocking people right now, Brian, is the degree to which Jiu Jitsu has just skyrocketed in popularity, both in public awareness, but also in practice. What they don't understand is why it's so good. Why is Jiu Jitsu so effective? Like people like you, your fans, for example, right, from every walk of life, your fans go, man, Brian's a great guy, very smart guy, but why is he so big on this Jiu Jitsu thing? What's wrong with him? Like, we get it, people do karate, people do taekwondo, people do whatever else, kung fu, and he does Jiu Jitsu, and why is he touting it so loud, so often, to so many people he talks to? Why is it such a big deal to him? And he's a grown man, he's not a 7 or 8 year old kid who's, doing this and making forms. It's not that. He's a real grown man, intelligent, cultured individual who touts Jiu Jitsu like it saved his life. But here's the question I have for you. 1 year after you started doing Jiu Jitsu, how effectively would you have manhandled your original Brian Rose with no Jiu Jitsu? Tell me the difference in skill and confidence.
Yeah, like 10x,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, and that's what we need to talk about right now, is I need to somehow communicate that to your viewers and your fans, that level of effectiveness in that little amount of time, how is that possible? Because we see the movies, you see the Karate Kid, you see the general idea about martial arts, Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, right? That's when my dad came to America, is during that era, where it was all about the pretty punches and kicks. And don't get me wrong, those have their place. However, what's the difference between that and what's happening right now? Why is it that Jiu Jitsu is having a rise that no other martial art has had in such a little amount of time? So, with your permission, I'd like to demonstrate what I believe needs to be understood fully in order for someone to know, A, how to win a street fight in the most efficient way possible, and B, why Jiu Jitsu is such an unfair advantage. Shall we?
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Rener Gracie, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, entrepreneur, and chief instructor at Gracie University. Your grandfather, Helio Gracie, created the self-defense martial arts system of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the 1920s, and you are the third generation to continue his legacy. Your father, Rorion Gracie, is the founder of the UFC. You studied under both of these legends for 25 years and have gone on to create the largest online learning platform for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the world as part of the Gracie University. You are also the chief instructor of Gracie Survival Tactics for Law Enforcement, with an emphasis on de-escalation tactics for police, which is more relevant now than ever. Today, we're going to use live demonstrations to explore how anyone, anywhere can apply the principles of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to street fights, entrepreneurship, policing, and life. Rener, welcome to London Real.
Dude, what a pleasure, man. And congratulations on all the great work you're doing. And it's an honor to be here, especially since I know that you are a seasoned Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner as well. So there are a lot of interviews that I look forward to, but few more than this one.
Dude, thank you so much. And just thanks for everything you do. You and Huron, your Gracie breakdowns, your passion. I mean, it's your passion that everyone is attracted to, man. We love how excited you guys are about Jiu-Jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, self-defense, and all the stuff you do for law enforcement and your academy. It's just all super impressive. So the honor is mine, man. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Yeah, it's, I feel like I got lucky. I won the lottery being born into this Gracie family, and I benefited from, as early as I could walk, from the skills and the influence and the leadership in my family. And I'm like, man, if it was given to me, at the very least I can do is inspire other people and share with as many people around the world. And that's what I look forward to doing every single day of my life, including today.
Well, I'd love to dive a little deeper, maybe in a bit, as far as what that whole legacy looked like. What's it like to grow up with, Gracie as your surname? I know Henzo once said it's like a boy named Sue. Everyone's looking out for you. So I'm sure there's some upside and downside. But just for people to know, I first started training Gracie Jiu Jitsu in 2002. I was in London, and I had just come off of 2001 in New York City, which was the worst year of my life. 9/11 had just happened. I broke up with a girlfriend of 4 years, and I had just had 2 heroin overdoses. So I was in a really bad shape when I moved to London. And I mean, honestly, Henner, I met a guy in June who had trained with Roger Gracie here and his father, Mauricio Gomez. And I started training jiu-jitsu, man. And I was honestly like almost a shell of a man. And that martial art, I trained solid for 8 years, and it really gave me my life back. So, in some ways, I got to thank you and your family for that. It was a real game changer for me.
Yeah, and it really is the family thing. It's a lot of people don't know this, but the Gracie family is the largest sports family in recorded history, right? With over, 250 Gracies on the family tree. My grandfather had 9 children. My great uncle Carlos had 21 children. Between the 2 of them, they had 105 grandchildren, and now they have great grandchildren. And it's like they're like rabbits, bro. They just don't stop multiplying, except all deadly lethal rabbits that'll choke your neck, so it's a fun family to be part of. Obviously, like any family, it has its highs and lows and pros and cons, but by and large, the Gracie family is responsible in many ways for a movement right now in martial arts that is changing a lot of lives, and I appreciate the feedback, and it's great to see how far it's reaching.
Yeah, it's incredible stuff. And like you said, the family tree is amazing. I think this entire page is dedicated to it. But the good news is that there's Gracies that have gone all over the world and had helped a lot of people come around. And of course, the UFC, which maybe we'll get into later, as far as how that opened the eyes of everyone to the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And honestly, for me, the first, I think, 5 guests I had on London Real back in 2011 were dudes from Roger Gracie Academy here in London, because they were cool dudes that we know could have on the show, and they talked about whatever profession they were in. So, I mean, London Real has been based in martial arts for so long, and I was lucky enough to go down to Brazil. I trained at Gracie Barra. I trained with the Brazilian top team. I went to Tokyo to the Pride Fighting Championships, and I've gone on this whole journey, and it's been absolutely incredible. So, I'm super excited to talk about this today. I'm also cognizant that we got people watching us who probably don't know anything about jiu-jitsu, probably never have a martial arts lesson in their life, maybe thinks fighting is for thugs or for guys in cages. What do you say to people when they come up to you and say, no, I don't fight. I would never come and train at your academy in Torrance. I'm a lover, not a fighter. What do you say when people say that?
First of all, I want to just make a slight adjustment to what you said. People who've never heard of jiu-jitsu, I think that's pretty rare now. Fortunately, is that the UFC is one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing spectator sport in the world. And every single weekend, the UFC is an infomercial for the efficacy of jiu-jitsu, because if you go in there without it, you're getting choked out. And if you go in there with jiu-jitsu, right, Joe Rogan is yelling, rear naked choke, doing this, the twister, the triangle choke, his Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. So Joe Rogan's one of the greatest ambassadors we have for jiu-jitsu, because he's a black belt and he's out there spilling his guts and giving all this energy. So as a spectator, it's impossible to watch an MMA or at least a UFC fight and not feel like, wow, this is some amazing stuff. Right, and this all began back in 1993 when the UFC started. My family was part of that beginning. Royce went in there and choked out these giants, and people are looking at the screen thinking, man, this little guy's gonna get beat up for sure, and then he wins. He's gonna lose for sure, and then he chokes the guy out. 15 minutes later, Dan Severn's tapping out from a triangle choke. So people have heard of jiu-jitsu. What's shocking people right now, Brian, is the degree to which jiu-jitsu has just skyrocketed in popularity, both in public awareness, but also in practice. And I think some people, what they don't understand is why it's so good. Why is jiu-jitsu so effective? Why is there, people like you, your fans, for example, right, from every walk of life, your fans go, man, Brian's a great guy, very smart guy, but why is he so big on this jiu-jitsu thing? What's wrong with him? We get it. People do karate, people do taekwondo, people do whatever else, kung fu, and he does jiu-jitsu. And why is he touting it so loud, so often, to so many people he talks to? Why is it such a big deal to him? And he's a grown man. He's not a 7 or 8 year old kid who's, doing this and making forms. It's not that. He's a real grown man, intelligent, right, cultured individual who touts jiu-jitsu like it saved his life. And I think that's where the mishap or the disconnect is, which is why I get so passionate to get on here and communicate about it, because once perfectly communicated why jiu-jitsu is so ridiculously amazing and why really it's an unfair advantage for anyone who knows it. Once I communicate that truth, we turn jiu-jitsu kind of couch fans into jiu-jitsu practitioners. And that's where every Gracie breakdown comes from. That's where every interview comes from. Everything has one purpose. Get someone off the couch of skepticism and onto the mat of effectiveness, jiu-jitsu mat somewhere around the world. And if after this interview, one person goes, man, that Henner guy, he's kind of loud. He might have had, he has a little too much energy, but he sounds like he makes sense and I want to go practice some jiu-jitsu. If we can do that, we're good to go. Because the reality is, Brian, you know this. You didn't, I don't know, have you practiced martial arts before jiu-jitsu?
I hadn't really. I mean, I think I took a Taekwondo class when I was a kid.
Everybody has.
I hadn't in like
except for
10
me,
years.
everybody has. So the point is, but here's the question I have for you. 1 year after you had been training jiu-jitsu, 1 year, just 1 year, not 10, not even a black belt, probably a dirty white belt. 1 year after you started doing jiu-jitsu, how effectively would you have manhandled your original Brian Rose with no jiu-jitsu? Tell me the difference in skill and confidence.
Yeah, like 10x,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that's what we need to talk about right now, is I need to somehow communicate that to your viewers and your fans, that level of effectiveness in that little amount of time, how is that possible? Because we see the movies, you see the Karate Kid, you see the general idea about martial arts, Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, right? That's when my dad came to America, is during that era where it was all about the pretty punches and kicks. And don't get me wrong, those have their place. However, what's the difference between that and what's happening right now? Why is it that jiu-jitsu is having a rise that no other martial art has had in such a little amount of time? So with your permission, I'd like to demonstrate what I believe needs to be understood fully in order for someone to know, A, how to win a street fight in the most efficient way possible, and B, why jiu-jitsu is such an unfair advantage. Shall we?
Yeah, I think we should, because like you said, people are thinking they got the karate guy, the boxing guy.
What's the difference?
What's the difference, right? It's one of 10 flavors, then it doesn't matter what I take, but you want to show them that there is a massive difference.
And here's the deal. Yes, to understand why jiu-jitsu, because in terms of the track record, let's also speak about that. 100 years, Gracie, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, since my grandfather and his brother started doing it in the early 1920s, we're nearing 100 years. No other martial art in the history of martial arts has shared or experienced the track record of success against other disciplines that Jiu-Jitsu has experienced, right? Jiu-Jitsu has fought virtually every other martial art style on the planet and defeated all of them. The only people who stand a chance against Jiu-Jitsu are the people who adopt Jiu-Jitsu. But that's not true for any other martial art, because we fought against every single one of them successfully and they get choked out in 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 12 minutes, invariably, even with no weight classes, we've proven. And that's why the UFC was such a big hit. That's why the US Army has officially adopted Gracie Jiu-Jitsu from the early 1990s. That's why law enforcement around the country are now adopting it, because the evidence is undeniable, the data is empirical, and that's why, and that's what I want to demonstrate, is exactly what that is. So if you're good with it, Brian, I'd like to bring in our training partner and demonstration partner for the day. Evandro, come on in, please. We're going to back up a little so you guys can see us. You guys, this is Evandro. He's one of the head instructors here at Gracie University and one of the most spectacular humans and most fascinating humans you'll ever meet in your life. So if you ever see him at the airport, sit down, talk to him. Not anytime soon because of COVID, but you guys know what's going down. You guys, hello guys. In order to understand why jiu-jitsu reigns supreme, you have to understand what's called the punch power scale. Every punch in a street fight exists on a scale from 1 to 10. Okay, let me demonstrate. So we're gonna go to the ground, right, where lots of fights end up. We're going to the ground. Evandro's inside my guard, okay? Look at this quick little, we coined this term punch power scale to really help it understand for beginners. If I'm in the bottom of the fight and Evandro's here, and I were to punch him with this hand, look, I'm punching right here. Because I'm only using one joint in the punch, this is a level 1 punch. Okay, now if I were to use this arm and I would do this, boom, 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 that's a level 2 punch because I'm using 2 joints are involved in the punch. If Evandro sits up and I use my arm like this and go boom and I hit him in the face, that's a level 3 punch, 1, 2, 3. So I have 3 joints enabling the power and leverage of that strike. If I use my hips, if I were to twist, boom, and I were to twist my body, that's a level 4 strike in the fight. And now, if Evandro were to pull this back and do the same thing in reverse, that's a level 5 because he had all 4 joints plus gravity equals a level 5 punch. And then you have also 6 through 10. Punches 6 through 10, Brian, are standing strikes thrown by various strikers. So a level 10 is Mike Tyson in his prime. Perfect power, good footing, full body momentum. He's gonna drop you guaranteed. A level 6 punch is someone who's standing up without his experience, a drunk guy at a bar throwing a punch on his feet. So strikes level 1 through 5 are a function of how many joints are being involved in the strike. Levels 6 through 10 are a function of who's throwing the punch from their standing 2 feet. Now, this is so important to understand because in a street fight, let's say I get taken down by a larger person and I'm on the bottom of the fight. What I do is I position myself at a position where Evandro, for example, this is just one of many, where Evandro cannot strike me with anything. Maybe like this hand on the back of my head a little bit. Look, he's hitting the back of my head with a little 1 or a 2, okay? But I'm over here controlling the distance. And from a distance where he cannot use any levels 6 through 10, I can deploy a level 10 submission and choke him unconscious in 6 seconds. So this is the secret to jiu-jitsu. We position ourselves relative to our opponents at a distance where they cannot reach us with their dangerous strikes. And what we do is we allow ourselves to use our level 10 submissions at distances where they cannot. And if we stand up, for example, if Andrew, come this way a little bit. If we're standing, for example, every martial art that relies on striking, punching, and kick as their means of victory. Now, jiu-jitsu includes strikes, but not as an entire means of victory. Use it as distraction or setup or a timing for a takedown, but not standing there toe-to-toe trading punches. For other martial arts, by and large, if I want to hit Evandro with the right hand, let's just say, his right hand can also reach mine. And that's a fundamental problem because when I try to land my level 10 strike or level 7 or whatever my skill level is, he can also land his 7, 8, or 9. And if he's stronger, more powerful, or heavier, his is gonna land with more damage. So jiu-jitsu instead teaches this idea that if he's standing here and I'm standing, I wanna stand at a distance, put your arm out, where he can't reach me, but I can't reach him. So I'm not gonna stand and trade levels 9s and 10s. I'm gonna say, he steps towards me, I step back. He steps again, I step in, boom, and I clinch him right here. Now, we're standing, but we're in such a tight clinch that any strikes he delivers, look how many joints, look how many joints. Look, 1, 2. So even standing, it's a level 2 strike because I'm so close, I've suffocated the distance of effectiveness. So fundamentally, his objective is to land a perfect strike from the perfect distance. Look, there's one perfect distance for his level 10. My effectiveness only relies on me grabbing him one time. And then from here, look, we're gonna go to the ground, and then we get to a position of closeness where from here, he can't hit. Look, but 1s and 2s, hit the back of my head right there. Look, maybe a little strike right there. It's not gonna knock me out. And then from here, I grab his arm, I loop it up, I slide my knee up, boom, and I catch his arm in an arm bar, level 10 submission. So this is it. The challenge with other martial arts is that strength and speed are integral prerequisites for effectiveness. Because how do you expect to hit someone without getting hit? Only one way, being faster, where you can deliver and then you can move out of the way or block quick enough. Jiu-jitsu is one of the only martial arts on the planet where strength and speed are not a prerequisite for success. And that's why I'm so excited to share it, because when someone looks at this and goes, wow, so you're telling me I can be slow, weak, smaller, and unathletic, and still choke out someone twice my size? Yes, and there are many ways. And what makes it so remarkable is not only can you do this from the top of the fight, you can do this from underneath a person. Come on back in. So look, we're here again from the guard. Beautiful position. Okay, I showed you the triangle. If I'm here and the triangle's not working, I use my knee, I bend his arm, I get his arm, and now look, punch me in the face, for real. There's no punch, but yet I can break his shoulder right here. He tapped out, so I release. So the ability to deploy level 10 submissions against 1s and 2s in terms of strikes, that in a nutshell is the secret to why jiu-jitsu has had such a success and why so many adults, right? When you think of taekwondo and karate, for example, you said you did a taekwondo class when you were a kid. Most people have. And when you think of that, you go, yeah, that's something that kids do. Now, some adults are masterful. Lyoto Machida, one of my best friends, karate master, and like, he'll hit you so beautifully, you don't even know what happened. But the point is, the association to karate and taekwondo or other traditional arts is more for younger practitioners. Why is it that jiu-jitsu, disproportionately, the association is to adults practicing jiu-jitsu? Because adults want to be effective without getting punched. right? We can't afford to get injured. You got to go back to work the next day. So you want to be able to get into a fight, if at all necessary, defend yourself, neutralize the situation, not get hurt, and if possible, not even hurt your opponent, because your effectiveness allows you to have a violent scalability element that most other martial arts don't have, which is control the situation without violence, use the submission, slow the fight down. Now, the last thing I'll say about general street fights, Brian, is this. People want to talk about how to win a street fight. What's the most important thing? Listen, avoid ego and alcohol. That's how you avoid a street fight. The hardest fight is the one you walk away from because you check yourself. You say, hey, no problem. You can have the parking spot. It's all good. Because the truth is, doesn't matter how good your jiu-jitsu, how good your skill set is, you have to walk away if at all possible. And what does that mean? If someone's life or limb is not in imminent danger, you should not get into a street fight. There's no need. Disagreement, you can have it. Problem, call me whatever you want. No problem. And that's the hardest part. And I think at the core of the ability to do that has to be someone's understanding that if someone walks up to you and says, hey, you mother effer, what's wrong with you? Why'd you walk on my sidewalk? Whatever they say, if you're gonna fight that person for being aggressive with you, who you don't even know who that person is, if you're gonna fight that person, you're giving them control over you, because how are you gonna let something that someone says who doesn't even know who you are trigger you to the point of anger that you're gonna physically now risk their life, your life? It's a fight nonetheless. You're gonna get into a physical altercation because of what some person you've never met before said to you. If a kid walks up to you, kicks you in the shins, and you say, hey, you're stupid, are you gonna fight the kid, or are you gonna say, wow, what a child? He just kicked a grown-up and doesn't know. His parents should teach him better. He's having a bad day. He's angry. He didn't get his lollipop over there. Oh, poor kid. If you would have that spirit with the kid, then why does a grown-up walk up grown-ups are just grown-up children? Why is a grown-up who's having a bad day or is on drugs or alcohol walk up and say something crazy or cut you off in traffic? Why are you gonna fight that person when they should be given the same disregard and just kind of, hey, no problem spirit that you would give a child who walks up and kicks you in the shin? That's how I look at it. Now, if you're looking for a fight, that's your problem. But what I'm saying is this: when it comes to how to win a street fight, you win it by not getting into one to begin with. But if you have to get into one because someone's life is in danger, guess what? Jiu-jitsu is the way. It's not even fair. It's so effective, it's not even fair, because you're gonna put yourself at a distance that makes it impossible for them to hurt you, right? They have no power strikes, and you're gonna be effective against them from that same distance. And that's what I love about it. Dude, fights are not about fair. Street fights, there is no fairness scale in a street fight. You either go home, or you go to the hospital, or you die. It's one of those three. And I'm just here to help as many people as possible go straight home, skip the hospital, skip the morgue, and we're going back to our family at the end of every single day.
Yeah, no, that's powerful stuff. I appreciate that, Henner. Have you ever been in a street fight?
Good question. Let's talk some more.
Thank you for that demo.
Thanks,
powerful.
We'll bring him back in. We'll bring him back in a second. We got lots more to talk about. So the answer is yes. 7th grade, you know what I'm saying, as a kid. But since then, every single altercation that has even come close to coming to fruition has been neutralized, Brian, by the absolute confidence, verbal de-escalation, and clarity with the person. Boom. And what's fascinating is when you speak to people with the confidence that jiu-jitsu provides you, they can feel it. They go, oh my gosh, I don't know if it's worth it, because this guy, either he's a black belt in some dangerous martial art or he's carrying a gun right now based on how he's talking to me. That's how sure he is of his space and of the situation in front of him. I don't know if I want to cross that line. So I've had some altercations where something comes up and I have to address the situation, and I speak so clearly that they go, it's not worth it. But yeah, the last one was 7th grade, where it was a school dance, guy came out with an attitude, got taken. And now this is not counting Gracie challenge matches, which have happened since then, where people come in and want to test themselves against jiu-jitsu. Right at the beginning of the UFC, right, first few years, it still wasn't worldwide. People would still come in, boxers, kickboxers, and want to fight someone, or taekwondo. And I had a good handful of those as well, which I was privileged and enjoyed very much, but I wouldn't consider that a street fight, because they came in saying, hey, I want to fight. And then they would choose someone from the lineup. And it was like me and my brothers, and it was like, I'll choose him. And then boom, I get chosen, I get in there and have some fun.
So you did those. I mean, those must have been intense.
Not anymore, they're done, right? Right now, there's no more, because there's no more doubt. There used to be doubt. As long as there's doubt, there's gonna be Gracie challenge matches. When there's no doubt, everyone believes we're all team jiu-jitsu now. If you're in martial arts, you're team jiu-jitsu. It's ironic, yeah. In the very beginning, all those challenge matches were done by martial artists and representatives of other disciplines who would come in, and in their mind, they couldn't imagine that they could, break the bricks for 30 years, boom, and shatter 14 bricks in a row, and then come into it with the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu guy and get taken down in 47 seconds and get choked unconscious. And then tap out and not know what, all they thought was it was luck. So they would often want to fight 2 or 3 or 4 times, but invariably, they were neutralized, and they, at that point, became converts, and they go, man, 30 years of breaking bricks, I want to learn this jiu-jitsu stuff now to at least kind of complete my skill set, which is beautiful.
And you guys have old videotapes of probably you and your dad, and I've seen the Hickson tapes of these fights when guys would just come in and you would have to kind of fight him, right?
It was listen, to the outside eye, untrained eye, it was very like, oh my gosh, cockfighting, whatever, human cockfighting. But no, listen, this is science. The Gracie challenge matches were all science. It was, you master your craft, I master mine. Let's see what happens when we put these two together. When you tap out or knock out, we stop the fight. Other than that, there are no rules. And really, those Gracie challenge matches that are all over YouTube were the precursor to the UFC, right? It was an idea of let's put different martial artists against each other, see what works and what doesn't. And it was, obviously, my father was involved in the creation of the UFC, and people look at it, man, it was just a big infomercial for Gracie Jiu Jitsu, as if that was a bad thing. No, it's exactly what it was. Let's not hide from the reality. All we wanted to do was show all the martial arts, savate, kickboxing, boxing, judo, sumo, wrestling, shoot fighting, jiu-jitsu. Put those guys to fight against each other in an 8-man single elimination tournament, UFC 1, 1993, Denver, Colorado, and say, let's see what happens. And then now what wasn't rigged were the actual fights. They went in there and actually fought with no time limit and no rules. And the smaller, less athletic, physically less imposing person went in there and defeated all these giant, superhero looking guys. And it was very effective. It was a very effective method to put jiu-jitsu on the map. We knew jiu-jitsu's unfair advantage, the one I just demonstrated to you. As second, we affect the distance, because people always ask, Henner, what is the biggest thing that jiu-jitsu, what is the biggest change and contribution your family has had to fighting in America or in the Western world, right? And if I had to nail one thing down, I'd say this: the Gracie family has changed the distance at which a fight is fought. Before Gracie family, before Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you would say, yeah, get up and fight like a man. No one's saying that to GSP or Habib or Conor. When the fight goes down and they're in the tangle of the fight now and the chokes are real and Nate Diaz, these guys are doing their thing, no one is saying, get up and fight like a man. Unless they're very uneducated and totally drunk and like totally couch potato, big beard, huge belly UFC fan, those guys might say, get up and punch them. They're new to the game, right? But everyone else goes, oh, it's about to get interesting between these two grapplers. So Gracie family has changed the distance at which a fight is fought. Now, that's not to say there weren't other grappling arts before this, right? There's judo, there's wrestling, there's many others. But what we've done is said, hey, judo usually fought against judo. Wrestling would wrestle against wrestling. Those were sports. What jiu-jitsu did is says, wait a minute, let's take this skill set of grappling and submissions and distance management and technique and energy efficiency, and let's apply it in a no-rules setting against other martial arts in a real fight, so that we can really, as much as we can, replicate what a street fight would look like, and then give viewers the chance to choose for themselves what works and what doesn't. So that's what made the UFC so powerful, is that there was no fluff, there was no rule, do whatever you want, and let's see what happens. And it was clear that jiu-jitsu rose to the top because of this violation of the traditionally accepted fighting distance in America, and I would even go say around the world, but really, this is where the revolution started, right? So it changed that acceptable fighting distance, where there wasn't, get up and fight like a man is gone, and now it's, when the fight goes to the ground, if you don't know how to save energy, position yourself in defense, safe, punch-proof positioning, and then deploy powerful submissions that rely on leverage, not physical strength, if you don't know how to do that, you are gonna get submitted by someone who does. That's the exception. That's the fully accepted truth of martial arts today. Even in MMA at the highest level, you can be a good striker, but if you don't know what to do when the fight hits the ground, you're gonna get choked out in 4 seconds by someone who does. So everyone invests in their jiu-jitsu to the point where now there's guys fighting each other that are from different camps taught by Gracies on both sides. I mean, I've coached students of ours against my brother coaching another student on the other side of the same octagon, because we're their jiu-jitsu coaches for 2 separate fighters in the same weight class. So that's how intermingled jiu-jitsu is now with, the highest level of combat effectiveness. And it's beautiful because every weekend is an infomercial for jiu-jitsu. So people can go, man, that's so awesome. He just choked him. This weekend, there was a beautiful arm triangle in the UFC there, beautiful arm triangle from the bottom of half guard. And if you're a spectator, you're not saying, man, that was such a wimpy fighting style. You're saying, oh my gosh, how do I learn that? And I'm here to tell you, go to GracieUniversity.com. Boom. Next question.
And so the UFC was set up as kind of an infomercial for jiu-jitsu, but then you guys had to deliver. I mean, and you put in some savages in there, from the Ken Shamrocks to the Chemos to the, the Savants, the karate dudes. And then you decided to choose Royce as opposed to, say, Rickson Gracie, who was bigger, more of an accomplished career in Tokyo. You had to throw Royce in there, who was still a little unproven and smaller, and he still had to deliver. And so that was the big gamble that you took, and nobody can control what happened in there. But
no one can control what happened. And listen, to that extent, Royce deserves all the credit in the world for A, taking the charge there, and B, and then if you say, Royce, congratulations, great work, Royce is going to say, no, forget me, talk to my dad, Helio Gracie, Grandmaster Helio, and talk to jiu-jitsu. And I think that's what's so interesting, is when it comes to other martial arts, this is a reoccurring theme here. When it comes to other martial arts, if someone is spectacular, you praise the practitioner, because you know that the effectiveness with the other art, let's say kickboxing, if the effectiveness is there, you don't say, oh man, kickboxing is amazing. You go, oh man, that world champion kickboxer is spectacular because of their speed, their power, their athleticism. And my point is, those didn't exist in Royce, speed, power, and athleticism, right? He's just like me. We're just not the most powerful athletic guys on the planet, especially compared to who he was fighting. So in most other arts, you praise the deliverer of the art. In jiu-jitsu, you praise the art being delivered. That's why after UFC 1, he says, man, Royce, that was amazing. Oh my gosh, hey, there's Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. You have my brothers are amazing too. They all kick my butt. There's amazing things going on, and it's Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. So it was such a strong praise for the art. Isn't that remarkably different, right, Brian? Compared to what you normally see, right? You see an amazing boxer do his thing. You don't praise boxing, you praise the boxer, right? You say, man, what a Floyd, amazing boxer, best ever, whatever. A Mike Tyson, what an animal, what a specimen, right? So you look at that and you go, wow, that's beautiful. With jiu-jitsu, it's different. When someone's amazing at jiu-jitsu, they tend to go, yo, the technique, I just put in the time and absorbed the technique. I didn't get faster, stronger, or more powerful. Now, today with competitive jiu-jitsu, that changed a little bit, but generally when jiu-jitsu beats another martial art, you praise the art as much, if not more, than you praise the person. That's my assessment of that.
And also something we don't really mention here is that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was kind of born on the streets of Rio de Janeiro, where you guys would take on all comers. And from what I hear, fight on concrete floors, and, you would fight all the different types of martial arts. And so you guys weren't afraid to go in and fight till the end. I mean, that was also kind of in the family, in the style, right?
Listen, bro, for lack of a better comparison, Jiu-Jitsu for my family is nearly a religion, right? So this is what it is. We were taught from day one that when it comes to self-defense and when it comes to a fight, Jiu-Jitsu is the way. So as someone comes along and says, no, Jiu-Jitsu is not the way. Kickboxing is the way. Taekwondo is the way. That was how the West was won. That's how South America was won, and that's how coming to America, the same exact process repeated itself in the garages of Southern California here, over a good 10, 15 years before the UFC, after 40 years in Brazil, 10, 15 years here, and then the UFC. So the UFC was literally the tip of the iceberg of the amount of fights that have happened against other disciplines in Brazil, Vale Tudo, because that's what we were taught from day one, and it's in the Gracie family, you don't really know. Were you born and then you learned jiu-jitsu, or were you born to do jiu-jitsu? Were you conceived for jiu-jitsu? They never really tell you that as a kid in the family and as an adult. But when you kind of grow up into it, you go, wow, we're making a big difference here. This is a very powerful movement, and it's helping a lot of lives. So you kind of embrace it. Not all, right? Some Gracies do, some Gracies don't, to varying degrees. The point is, it's kind of a religion. And yes, when you're coming up and you learn this art and someone says they don't believe in it and they believe in something else, it's just a matter of science. No. This is because the principles are so sound. Some we've developed, some we've demonstrated here, some more we'll demonstrate in a second. The principles are so sound that you go, no, I don't care what you practice. If it's not jiu-jitsu, it's not as efficient for a real fight. And since we're talking about something here that is life and death, right? Because at the core of the Jiu-Jitsu Gracie family ambition to share Jiu-Jitsu isn't necessarily we're the best, everyone else isn't good. That's not the idea. The idea, and you can ask my grandfather, he's not with us anymore, but he told me this his whole life, that I was privileged to share with him my entire life. Eli, why you fight so much? Why all the challenge matches? And he would say, listen, I'm not a fighter. I'm a jiu-jitsu instructor who is fighting to demonstrate that which I believe in, so that people who see me and see my effectiveness will give me the chance to teach them. And that's how I look at it, right? So today, because everyone does jujitsu, that when I was 19, 20 years old, on the verge of choosing my life's path, was it MMA? Was it to share jujitsu with the world, right? I realized, man, everyone already adopted it. So now it's not so much a quest of proving that it works. It became more a quest of how can we organize curriculums so that it can be disseminated to the whole world in a structured fashion where anyone, anywhere on the planet with an internet connection can do jujitsu. And that's what we've accomplished today. And we're very happy with the work we've done. I'm very happy with the path we've chosen. And the journey continues every single day. And law enforcement in America right now, is one thing that could not be in a tougher place. It could not be in a more tense relationship between law enforcement and the communities they're serving. And the challenge is that, it's not going to get any better because there's more cameras, there's more eyes on it, which is a good thing, but the deficiencies in law enforcement training have never been so obvious. And this is why jiu-jitsu, now more than ever, is needed both in the community, on the civilian side, but also on the law enforcement side, because no other art on the planet gives law enforcement the opportunity and the ability to neutralize a suspect non-violently. And that's the challenge we're having, at least in America right now, is the excessive use of force in cases where the public says, no, that level of force wasn't necessary. But if you were a cop, Brian, or I was a cop, in the exact same scenario, we wouldn't need that same level of force that was deployed and all over television and of course causing, all kinds of mayhem, rightfully so, because the people expect more from law enforcement.
Yeah, and let's talk about that because I know you do a lot of work with law enforcement. I've been watching your videos for years, and it always surprises me because you're using guns and knives and disarming people. I mean, stuff that I was never taught, in jiu-jitsu, but you guys have always been on the forefront of that. And, just recently I've been hearing Jocko Willink talk about this, who's a big jiu-jitsu fan, and Tim Kennedy, and talking about how a lot of these law enforcement people just don't have much training. So they don't even have the training of probably a white belt in your academy. And I've seen some demonstrations you do where they go to lethal force because they don't have a better choice. And maybe we can talk about that because
we certainly
should.
And I actually want to demonstrate a situation because I brought my duty belt here, so I'm going to demonstrate one with Evandro.
Okay, please.
So check this out, you guys. This is one for everyone. It's such an important demonstration because the culture in law enforcement right now, Brian, is what we call, you can come on in, Evandro. The culture is what we call an escalation culture. Unfortunately, this is I can't speak for every department, and I can't say that some officers aren't training, to de-escalate situations. But de-escalation usually, Brian, it basically ends with the talk. In other words, they'll talk about, hey sir, calm down, blah, blah, blah. They'll try to de-escalate verbally, but the second a situation becomes physical, almost all de-escalation mindset goes out the window, and that's where we're running into trouble. The conversations cops are having are not the problems. It's the actual physicality and the excessive level of force that is being used in situations where many people say, no, that wasn't necessary. So let me explain for the very lowest common denominator how this works. In every department, the way it works is if a suspect introduces a level of force, he attacks me, punches me, grabs me, or does whatever, that's what's called the indicator for a situation. Based on that indicator, an officer is authorized to use a responsive level of force based on a continuum that department has established. In other words, if he does A, I'm allowed to do B and C. That's what's justifiable based on the department's policy. So if he does D, I can do E and F. So right away, police officers are trained to immediately ask the question, what's the highest level of force I'm allowed to use based on the threat scenario presented by the suspect? And think about what that does to an officer. When someone does something and you ask yourself, what's the most force I can use right now? That's an escalation culture that is really tearing apart communities and damaging departments all over the country and their communities they're serving, because that's not what anyone wants to be subjected to. What's the highest level? It's almost like if my wife says X, what's the loudest I can raise my voice right now legally? It's like, yo, why would you ask that question? The opposite should be asked. If my wife asks me a question or says something I don't like, what's the calmest, most effective, lowest level of force I can use to communicate to her that X, Y, or Z? So you would do that in love relationships or in true family or friendships, you would do that, right? But when it comes to law enforcement, it's not happening. So what we need to do is get back to a de-escalation culture. Let me demonstrate how this is only possible with technique. For example, if Evandro's down, I'm the officer. Let's say the officer is arresting the suspect and gets on top of the situation here and is in the mount. This is called the mount. From here, I can go into a cuffing procedure. So it's a very dominant and great position to be in if you're the officer. If the suspect goes for the officer's gun from the bottom, grabs the officer's gun at this position, this is showing intent. The suspect has shown me that he wants to take my gun and shoot me. So if my partner was nearby or running up on us, or my partner was running up and he saw this, he's going for my gun. He's justified in shooting him to kill the suspect here in this situation because it's a deadly force situation, right? That's one. Or I would be justified at this point with drawing my own weapon and firing at the suspect here because he's shown that he's trying to take my weapon. Again, but if I'm mounted on Evandro and we're here, we're fighting, and he just has to go for my gun, go ahead. And I can do this, look. Grab my gun, for real. Look at my hooks, and look at my hands. Boom, boom, boom. I have very good hooks, I have double underhooks, and I have S-grips from the mount right here, so I locked. His hands cannot reach my weapon. At this point, backup is on its way. I can hear my partners are coming, and I can wait until backup gets here. Once I have help, then I'm good to go. But the point is,
and you're not hurting him there.
Sorry?
You're not hurting him. You're not hurting him at that point.
Zero.
He's just neutralized.
Calm, controlled jiu-jitsu.
Right.
I'm just preventing him from accessing my firearm. So this goes to show you that, let's change the position to the guard. Let's say I'm on the bottom of the fight, looking around. Look, let's say we're here. I'm on the bottom of the fight, I'm blocking punches. Jiu-jitsu, we already talked about it. Stage 1, keep him close, and I'm just waiting for backup. If he goes for my gun, that's deadly force. I could use deadly force. But if I underhook, grab and stretch, grab my gun on the side, grab my gun. For real. Go. There's no gun to grab. And I'm not using any energy, Brian. Underhook,
right.
I grab my own head, hug the neck. So right when he went for the gun, look what I do. It's called curl, connect, and kick. He goes, I curl, connect, and I kick off his hip. And now I close my side guard. Go, hold, and I'm chilling right here. So here's the bottom line. It doesn't matter what the position is, Brian. Officers need to know where they're safe in a fight. But this requires minimal training to know that from each position, there are safety maneuvers you can use to neutralize a subject without relying on deadly force, even when deadly force was justifiable. This is the big breakthrough. Just because a level of force is justifiable doesn't mean it's necessary. But the necessity of a technique or the necessity of a level of force, Brian, is directly correlated to the degree of training that the officers are provided. And this is the fundamental problem, is that officers only get 4 hours a year, sometimes every other year. And that's where we're running into trouble, is that these guys literally, a beginner jiu-jitsu student will have more training in 1 week, 4 classes, hour long each, than an officer gets an entire year, and their life is on the line every single day that they go to work. So wow. This is the biggest challenge. It's a budget concern, it's a department concern, it's a nationwide concern, but each department has to prioritize training like this so that these officers can learn basic techniques. The way I look at it is this. It's called the prefrontal cortex, right? PFC, the aspect of our brain that allows us to make rational decisions, to really calculate and contemplate if-then scenarios. If I do this, then this will happen, right? So all of that, throttling the level of force, the ability to throttle your level of force is a conscious choice. I'm not gonna put that much strength, I'm not gonna shoot him right now. The choice to throttle your input of force is the prefrontal cortex operation. Here's the problem. The maintenance of an active prefrontal cortex, right? Brain functionality, the maintenance of that, the use of that, the sustenance of that requires an actual or a perceived sense of control. So if you lose control in a situation, either actually lose control, or you're getting punched in the mouth, tasting your own blood, or at least in your mind, you're losing control, like things are slipping out of hand, what happens is called a amygdala hijack. So the amygdala, the lizard brain, the very primitive aspect of our brain, which is fight, flight, freeze, do whatever it takes to survive, right? The amygdala hijacks the PFC, and now the officer is in the middle of a otherwise somewhat controlled situation. If they feel like they lost control, they go all amygdala. And at that point, they're much more likely to use a level of force that later they look at it and say, man, I wish I didn't need to use that level of force. Well, unfortunately, your training did not provide you the skills to not have to use that level of force. So our point is this. Officers need what we call buoys of PFC activation. Let's say you're in the middle of the ocean, if I just dropped you off, that's a panicking situation, right? It's gonna suck. But right away, if there's a buoy right there, a little orange buoy, and you can hang on to one buoy, and then you see 20 feet that way is another buoy. You might suffer on the way to the other buoy, but you can at least get there and then catch your breath. So what we try to provide in very little amount of training time is give officers these positions of control in the context of a chaotic fight, so they can reactivate the PFC, the prefrontal cortex, and operate in a much more, right, safety conscious, controlled, deliberate manner, instead of just acting wildly without any conscious thought of what's gonna happen or the consequences of their actions. That's when we get into trouble. The problem is, if an officer always feels out of control, guess what? They're always gonna use force that maybe in retrospect they go, man, that wasn't necessary, but I had no other choice. And I don't even blame the officers. I don't even blame the officers. I blame the departments because they're not providing officers the training that they need in order to survive and control these otherwise dangerous situations. So it's easy to say, with all the training that I have, this is very easy. But for someone who gets no training, here's a gun, go enforce the law and fight anyone, but don't use your gun too soon or you're gonna get in trouble. You're setting them up for failure. And that's what we're doing, and it's really a challenge. With this 4 hours a year is very challenging, but here's what I will say. I can't change the number of I can't change the number of hours that an officer is provided in terms of training per year. I have no influence on that. What I can change is what officers are receiving in those 4-hour training blocks. And we're working as fast and as widely and as hard as we can to get this type of training into as many departments as possible. But I mean, we do over 1,000 departments per year, but we still haven't even scratched the surface. This is one of our #1 growing courses. Evandro is one of the head instructors for this course. He travels all over the country certifying police departments, but man, we have a long way to go because each department has to make their own choice as to when to integrate this next level type of training and this more progressive training practices based on control, not based on, more aggressive tactics, I should say. And it's just a matter of we have to just wait for the phone call. And unfortunately, it's a budget concern. It's politics in some departments.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.